So this is a 1988 Ford Mustang, the Fox Body. And this is the later generation, or the Aero front end. It's not the 4i like the earlier ones up to 82 or 83. This has it's supposed to have 3-piece headlights, but it has 1-piece headlights now. I bought it in 2022. I think it was. Sold my Focus like shortly after we talked. The car I was gonna keep forever, and bought this as just like a running driving car with a 2.5 stroker in it. So like the original engine, but stroked out with a nasty cam in it, and then tore it all down the winter of 22. Swapped the EcoBoost in and TKX trans, did the wide body, all of that over one winter. Last summer I drove it all year as like a stock configuration, and then this year I started doing some upgrades to it, like a big turbo, some fuel system stuff, adding some power, and I started getting to drifting this year.
Is that what you bought it for? Was to build a drift car, or did you just want to build something unique?
I wanted to build something unique. I want to use this for pretty much everything. I want to use it for drifting, track day stuff, road driving, and I don't want to have like a lot of compromises for anything. First and foremost, it's a street car. Like I want to just drive this like on days like today where it's nice out and just cruise around, but I want to be able to do everything with it.
So why'd you pick a Fox Body? Was it something you were looking for, or is it just because you found it and the light bulb came on?
I bought this car with the plan of swapping the EcoBoost into it.
We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But was the Fox Body on your list? Is that like, I'm gonna go out and find a Fox Body, or was it?
I've always wanted a Fox Body, and I've always wanted a notchback, which is what this is. It's not the fastback, it's the notchback. The time was just right. I wanted to get rid of the Focus, and I wanted to get something new and something rear-wheel drive, and this is it.
I guess the obvious thing then is, why the EcoBoost swap? Why not keep the stroker in it, or why not do something along those same lines? Why the EcoBoost?
Drawing from my experience with the Focus, I love this engine. Like, this platform's great. It makes a lot of power and it's cheap. This engine was $600.
Oh, come on.
It's a used takeout from a 2015 Escape. So it's got like 100-something thousand miles on it. I can buy them in this kind of mileage all day long for between $600 and $1,000. It's crazy.
So you can just blow them up at will?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
If it blows up, it's not a big deal.
Is that something that's popular amongst people with the Fox Body? I know that you did a video on your channel about the swap, and you had mentioned a couple things about there are mounts available for one version of the engine, but not the 2.0. Was that right? The 2.0 version that you have?
So they make mounts for the 2.3, but not for the 2.0. And there's not a lot of cars out there that are swapped. Probably the most famous one is Chelsea DeNova's. He did his swap like at the same time I had the idea for this car, because I had the idea for this build way before I bought the car. Like, I wanted to do an EcoBoost swap Fox Body way before, and whenever I saw him build his and have like the success with it, I wanted to follow along and do the same thing.
What's the big advantage of doing that, aside from the fact that there's a lot of them available?
So the engine is all aluminum. So it's aluminum block, aluminum head. Yeah. It's a super lightweight engine. It's hard to get an engine that's this powerful at this kind of weight. There are a lot of companies now that have them, but they're not as cheap. So like Volkswagen with the EA 888, Mercedes has a really powerful 4-cylinder now, but they're not as cheap as these and not as tunable as these.
Where did you start?
So the first thing I did was get the car running again, because it didn't actually run when I bought it. It was just a starter solenoid.
That's helpful.
Repaired it, drove it like that. Like I said, it had the nastiest cam in it. It idled like a rotary. Like it brop, 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 brop. It was hilarious to drive, but it didn't make much power. The first thing I did was tear it all down. I tore it down to a bare chassis. No suspension, no brake lines, no fuel lines. Everything was out of it. It was just a shell. And then I just rebuilt it from the ground up from there. So these are American Racing Vintage Groove. They're 18 by 10. So they're pretty wide. I had to get them wide to fit the wide body, because the fenders are 3 inches wider at each corner. So they fit a 275/35 tire on all 4 corners. So it is a square setup.
Yeah.
Whenever I do the drifting stuff, I do have a full spare set of wheels and tires that have not as expensive tires. I mean, these aren't crazy. They're just the Falcon Azenas, but these are my street wheel and tire setup. And then I have another setup for drift, and probably down the line get another setup for road racing or autocross, or use these.
Let's go in a little bit and talk about brakes. Stock-ish brakes on this thing, or did you do an upgrade kit?
Stock-ish, so these are later Cobra brakes. They are just a direct bolt-on. The Ford hierarchy, they kind of just all use the same mounts, but different rotors and calipers. So they're slightly bigger than the stock ones, and they're also 5-lug. So the car was originally 4-lug wheels. That swapped it over to 5-lug. The rear end also came from a similar, like a later 90s car, a 95 or 96 Mustang. So it's 3/4 of an inch wider, and it also has the 5-lug lug, and it came with the brake swap, so I just matched it on the front.
Suspension-wise, where'd we go there?
Basically all aftermarket tubular stuff. Whenever I took all the stock stuff out, I replaced it with all tubular stuff from a variety of brands, which I've now noticed is kind of a mistake.
Why is that?
Not all the suspension works together as it should. So I'm going to have to go through again this winter and start replacing stuff with either the same brand or upgraded stuff.
Gotcha.
But most of it's BMR or QA1. The coilovers are SR Performance, which is like a off-brand kind of like Fox Body only stuff. So those will also be getting replaced this winter.
So how did you match engine with transmission, and how did you pick a transmission for this?
Everything on the engine side is adapted over to small block Ford patterns. So it's a small block Ford flywheel and bell housing. So after that, I can adapt to anything that would bolt up to a stock 5.0 Mustang. So I picked the TKX transmission because it's lightweight. The dry weight on it's under 100 pounds for a 5-speed transmission, and it's rated at 600 foot-pounds of torque, or a little bit over 600 foot-pounds of torque. It's beefy, and it fits, and it's light. It is pretty smooth. It has some gear whine. It sounds more like a racing transmission than a street transmission, but that's more because of the gears that are in it. It's not exactly helical cut like the stock gears. They're a little bit more straight cut, so they do make a little bit more noise.
A little bit more music. Are these hard to find, like in good shape, or are the Fox bodies hard to find? Are they getting to that point?
They're not hard to find. They're getting more expensive though. These, like 5-6 years ago, like this car would have been a $500 car when I bought it. It's hard to find like a cleaner example, which this wasn't even a clean example. I had to repair some rust on the strut tower and on the floorboards. One of the things I did in the first winter was a lot of rust repair.
Was it a Pennsylvania car?
It was actually a Michigan car, so even worse.
Even more winter and salt and stuff.
But a clean Fox chassis like this will run up to like 10 grand.
Really?
And so it's hard to do this and cut it up, but this was a cheaper car, so I didn't feel as bad.
Yeah.
So this is a Carbon Creations GT500 style hood. So it's the vents are styled after the new GT500. And then I used the same hood pins that they use as well, the little quick latches.
What was the biggest challenge in doing this?
I think it was with the ECU and the ECU tuning. This ECU is a stock Ford ECU. It's a Focus ST ECU that's been reflashed to disable the passive anti-theft system. So like the stock cars need the body control module and the key and everything to actually turn the engine on. But with the passive anti-theft delete, it doesn't need that anymore. You just send it a signal from 12 volt on the ignition and it'll fire up and run. This is actually my second ECU that's been in here. I found out the first one we couldn't tune. I have no clue why.
Just wouldn't take it.
We plugged in, we're tuning this with HP tuners, plugged in the HP tuners device and loaded a tune onto it, and it just would not respond. It would not take any new tunes. So this one's actually from a company up in Michigan called Gemsport. They make some really, really good parts for these cars. Not only EcoBoost swapping the Fox body, they do EcoBoost swaps for S chassis, so like Nissan S chassis, BMW E36 and E46, so like some stuff that people really wouldn't like an EcoBoost in, but
wow,
they make some cool stuff up there.
Do you know what it weighs?
I weighed it after doing the EcoBoost swap, but before finishing off all the interior stuff, and it weighed 2,700 pounds without me in it. A fairly light chassis.
Right.
So the exhaust from the engine, just like the ST, it's a head-of-fold, so it's straight turbo bolted to the engine. From there, it's a homemade downpipe. I taught myself how to TIG weld and made my own downpipe out of stainless steel. And then from there back, it is an SVO exhaust. So a Mustang SVO, the 2.3 turbo original Mustang. Bolts right up. I made the downpipe to adapt right over to that, and it's just 3-inch exhaust the whole way through.